Hey everyone, in today's video, we're going to build a one-of-a-kind picture frame. We're going to build the entire frame out of epoxy resin. We're going to embed some 3D printed chili peppers assorted throughout the epoxy resin. I'm going to frame out this Scoville Heat Unit rating. It's a cool poster I got that has all the peppers of the world, and it ranks them by heat. It's about, 15 inches on the top, about 24 inches on the side. We're going to light the edge of the frame with some new style of bendable LED strips, power it by a rechargeable cordless 18650 battery, and then encase the entire thing in a little bit of a hardwood. So that's the idea. Here's kind of an idea of going to build a form that will have the short and the long side. Just some ideas here, but it'll end up looking like that as far as the frame goes. And we'll just glue all four sides together and then reuse some old edge form that I had from the barbecue island build. Let's get started. If you do decide to take a swing at this project, one thing I recommend is when you're making the form like this, I tried to get it at an exact 45-degree angle between the long form and the short form. And because I didn't get it perfectly 45 for each of them, it extended the resin volume and made it a little bit sharper of an angle. And it meant that the frame pieces didn't exactly line up with each other on the final fit up. So if you do, I recommend getting exactly a 45-degree angle on the form and then filling the volume of the epoxy to the exact same volume line each time on those forms. All right, we've got our completed and hopefully sealed epoxy form. We're about to do epoxy, but if you really want to test your skill level at forming a watertight epoxy form, no better test than a little bit of water. So I put a little bit of bead of silicone all the way around on the inside of these lines. Made it super clean because anything that's debris or dust is going to transpose to the epoxy itself. So make sure it's super clean, but let's go ahead and do a water test first and see what happens. I've got a little white line. You can see right there maybe. That's the line I want to pour my water to, or my epoxy to. Oh, already got a leak. Far left-hand side here. All right, let's fix it. All right, take two. Let's see if this guy holds water. And one little tip is when you're pouring epoxy and you're trying to figure out how inch exact epoxy to mix, you can actually put water in your form first, up to the level that you're going to pour that water out, mark it on the cup, and then that'll be how much epoxy you need. So let's see if this guy holds water. I'm going to pour it up to the final line that it's going to be in the future. So far so good. Nope. Oh, yep, I got a leak still somewhere. Damn it! All right, so the first pour went well. It's dried. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. Your one enemy when it comes to pouring epoxy are bubbles. I got rid of the extra resin by putting them in a little bit of a tray overnight. So this is the same resin, and notice it's not cured 100% all the way, so it's still viable, a little bit pliable here. This is just scrap, but you can see there's probably 1,000,000 bubbles in there. I don't know if you can see them. And so I don't have a pressure tank to put the epoxy in to take the bubbles out, so my only weapon against bubbles is essentially to hit it with some fire 3 or 4 times as the resin is drying. So now we're going to set in our first set of chilies. I'm going to super glue them down to this first layer that's already dried. This is actually the top of the picture frame. So I'm going to pick my best side of the chili, have that facing down, which is actually up. Put a little drop of glue, shouldn't affect the epoxy, and then glue it down. My concern is that these chilies are 3D printed and they're hollow, and they might float. And I don't want them to float. Oh, and one other thing, I actually sprayed these guys with clear acrylic coating after the paint dried, because I didn't know if the epoxy resin was going to react with the acrylic paint and have it melt the paint or have the paint, spread throughout the epoxy. So hopefully that clear acrylic I sprayed on these chilies will protect the paint from the epoxy. And I'm going to pour just enough clear epoxy and have about 1/8 of an inch left before my top of that white line, because I'm going to do one more pour, which is going to have white dye or white paint in it, so it's completely opaque and not see-through, so it gives the chilies a white background so you can see the chilies more, and then hopefully also it'll enhance the LED lighting, make it a little bit brighter. All right, instead of concrete Christmas, it's epoxy excitement. Resin reveal day. Let's see what this thing looks like. Days like this, it's like always the excitement about your idea, whether it actually is gonna work. I injured myself on another project. Kickback from an angle grinder. Stay tuned for that video. Oh, there we go. Oh boy. Yeah. My goal was to make this form so smooth and perfect that I wouldn't have to finish the piece at all. What I mean by finish, I mean sand it smooth to make it shiny. But it looks like it came out okay. So that'll be the top of the form, or the picture frame. Looks like the super glue might have reacted with the epoxy, so I'm gonna have to fix that. Gotta do 3 more sides, shine them up, put them together, get the lights on and the wood. So I'm about to pour the second form. I've got the first one right here, it's gonna be the top, and this one's gonna be the bottom, but I need to insert the power supply for it, and it's gonna go inside the frame. I'm gonna try to hide it as much as possible, but in order for me to do that, I need to make some negative space inside this form. So I'm going to take some foam, create the same size block, wrap this in tape, put that in here, and then pour the epoxy so it'll create a void. I'll take this out, there'll be a nice void there, and then I can actually set the power supply inside that form. think it's almost impossible to do an epoxy project where you don't have to do the finishing work, which means sand it from 180 grit all the way to 3000. So I started off here with, I think, 180, and I did a dry sand, so dust was everywhere. You got your mask on, your glasses, and a vacuum. But then I quickly switched to water, and that obviously reduced the dust completely, and I could take the mask off, and the water was much more effective. But what did I run through? I think 180, 300, 400, 600, 800, 1200, 24, and then 3000 and 5000 was a lot. So a ton of finishing work, but it was worth it. It definitely improved the clearness of the resin, made it closer looking like glass. You definitely want to take a rag and get all the residue off when you're switching grits too. So here I'm using the table saw to cut a groove to receive the LED light strips. So the LED light strips are probably double a 1/8 inch blade width. So I had to do one slice, move the table saw point, and then do another. I guarantee that any DIYer has got a giant tub of random nuts, screws, and bolts and washers. I kept my really tiny ones separate in this little jar. Probably haven't used this in about 10 years. So we're going to see if we can find a super tiny little threaded screw that can go into the circuit board and get mounted right here to the picture frame. I ended up actually skinning the entire outside with some L-shaped pine wood edging just from Home Depot, so you wouldn't see the outside edges and the LED light strip. Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I think this is a really fun project, proof of concept. I definitely learned a lot pouring my first set of epoxy. The key to probably this whole project was was this really new style of LED light strips. It's super skinny. You don't see the individual LED lights inside. You can cut it anywhere. Operates on 3 volts, 5 volts. Yeah, you can definitely take this concept anywhere. You know, fill this thing with candy or nuts and bolts or Legos, whatever you want to put in that resin. I recommend filling the resin up with more contents and assets because the resin's expensive and you can fill it with cheaper stuff. That's actually really better. Really a fun project for me. And keep in mind, if I can do this, so can you.